Do you have rules in your home? Yes? Why? Oh, somebody's wondering already. For the smooth running of the home? Is that a fair comment? Usually it's for the smooth running of things, to make sure people can interact right with one another without falling out over everything. Maybe that's the cause of falling out, I don't know, but that's why we often have rules in the home. How about these? Ring bell for maid service. If no answer, do it yourself. You may touch the dust, but please don't write in it. If you don't like my standards for cooking, lower your standards. Good one for Christmas, this one. A balanced diet is a drumstick in each hand. Help keep the kitchen clean, eat out. And finally, blessed are those who can laugh at themselves, for they shall never cease to be amused. But we do usually have house rules, don't we? Even if it's just whether or not to keep the toilet lid down. But next question. What's the difference between personal spirituality and religion? What's the difference between personal spirituality and religion? Well, first of all, grace, did someone say? I thought I heard someone shout grace. That's a good start. Very good. What is religion? A habit? A routine and a ritual? Something that's spiritually exercised with others? The rules of religion, then? Well, they surely are merely to help us to get along, to worship together with some kind of accord rather than bedlam, which usually ensues when you've got more than a few people who are gathered around together. Well, rules certainly help any society or a group to get along together. However, our spirituality, there's all sorts of things we could say about our personal spirituality, but surely our personal spirituality is probably best seen in our relationships. First, our relationship with God through Christ, then in our relationship with our neighbor, in our everyday life, but especially through the church. Didn't they say, see what love they have for one another? Now, I think it's fair to say that sometimes rules can be difficult to understand. Why do we need to do such and such? I get why from my kids an awful lot. Why don't I have to go to bed? I'm not tired. Well, you will be in the morning if you don't get to bed when you're supposed to. And the reality is that we really don't like to be told what to do and what not to do. Did you notice an example of that in our reading in the Old Testament today? We looked at 2 Samuel chapter 7. King David, with all the right intentions and wanting to put God first and having a deep sense of inner spirituality and a love of his religion and a love of his God, wanted to build a temple. And there really was nothing wrong in that at all. And the prophet Nathan's first response was basically, go for it. God is obviously with you. Surely he would appreciate this particular evidence of your spirituality, of your religion. But that wasn't God's will. And that was made clear to David. Now, I think it's probably fair to say that when David was first knocked back from this, that he'd really set his heart upon, he probably wasn't all that pleased about it, but he saw no choice, though he carried on making extensive preparations so that his son might continue that work. But how much more importantly, even than that, the work that he wanted to do for his God was this: that God pointed him towards a rulership, beginning with his own, that would have no end. We read that as an extra little verse at the end of the main body of our reading, 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 16. You will always have descendants, and I will make your kingdom last forever. Your dynasty will never end. Now, we considered a little of that a few weeks ago before Advent, at the very end of the last Christian calendar, when we had Christ the King Sunday, and we were thinking about Christ as King. But during Advent, we've been returning to the position that David himself found himself in. That of waiting. Waiting, trusting, obeying, and rejoicing in the coming Messiah, Christ. So that's what David wanted to do. That's what David was told, and that David obeyed. And he was pointed to something that was far greater again than anything he might do, which was to be found in Christ himself. Now, what does that require of us? What does it require of us that we might be able to get along with one another as we worship God together, either in this church or in any other temple of God? Well, did you notice we've got a couple of catechism questions again this week? I just want to read them and their answers for us to just think upon. Question 39 asks, what is the duty which God requires of humankind? The duty which God requires of humankind is obedience to his revealed will. And then the next question, what did God at first reveal to humankind for the rule of his obedience? The rule which God at first revealed to humans for his obedience was the moral law. What is the moral law? That seems to be a natural question. Actually, the next question and answer is not in the sheets. I've omitted to have this one put in this week. Actually asks, where is the moral law summarily comprehended? That's a complicated way of basically saying, where can we find that law? The moral law is basically summed up in the 10 Commandments. Now, we're going to look at the 10 Commandments over the course of this coming year. That's barely one a month, so we'll just be doing it every few weeks over this coming year. Not as we've been doing the catechism during this past year, where we've been doing it most weeks. During this coming year, it'll just be once a month that we're going to be looking at that as we consider the 10 Commandments. But do you recall how Jesus summed them up? Let's establish that before we even go into them over this coming year. And this is the important thing that we want to keep in focus throughout this coming year. Jesus summed them up as, love God with your whole might and strength and mind and thoughts, every fiber of your being, and love your neighbor as yourself. That means, of course, you've got to love yourself, but it especially means we also have to love our neighbor. Let's see how that goes through this coming year. Despite the highs and the lows that we are inevitably going to face in another year. But let us also make sure that we practice our religion and our spirituality in a disposition of love, especially during this wonderful season of Christmas, when sometimes it seems so much easier, and other times perhaps feels a little harder. Amen.